being 2 o'clock on Wednesday and being Private Members' Day, I call upon the member for St. George's Humber to present his private member's resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is the first opportunity that I've had to speak in a debate since the return to the House of Assembly. I just want to congratulate all the returning members and also congratulate the new members to this House and welcome them to the House. It's great it's a great honour really to be selected by your fellow citizens to serve in this type of legislature. And I know we all come here with the good intentions of bettering this province. So I want to congratulate everyone and look forward to working with you over the next number of years. Also, I want to thank the people of St. George's Humber for electing me as their member, the new district of St. George's Humber. Mr. Speaker, this is the first private member's resolution from the government side of the House since the election as well. I just want to take a couple of moments to read the resolution into the record of the House. Whereas other jurisdictions, such as Norway, have been more responsible and use sovereign wealth funds which create a long-term legacy from non-renewable resource development, and whereas the previous government failed to manage resource revenues in a responsible manner, be it resolved that the House of Assembly supports the establishment of a legacy fund in this province, which will result in long-term benefits from non-renewable natural resources. So that's the resolution today. And Mr. Speaker, private members' resolutions can have a big impact in this House, Mr. Speaker. They're not binding upon government, but in the past, the passage of private members' resolutions have had an impact. For example, the establishment of the All-Parties Committee on Mental Health Issues was started by the member for St. John's Centre through a private member's resolution. We've also had resolutions in relation to topics such as the fishery, equalization, and many other issues throughout the years. So resolutions can draw attention to an issue, can create a debate and a discussion that is useful to the future of the province. So that's in that sort of vein, I bring forward this private member's resolution. I think this is an important issue. I think I believe it's this issue, the issue that this motion deals with is one of the most important issues facing the province today. There may be others that are more urgent or more immediate, but I think this issue itself is one of the most crucial issues facing the province today and our long-term prosperity of the province, Mr. Speaker. The issue at the heart of this resolution is, are we able to find a better way to manage the resource revenue from our natural resources, ways that will achieve both short-term and long-term benefits from these resources? And can we find ways that will allow us to avoid the boom and bust cycles that often come with natural resources? And the question is, can we find ways of taking a finite resource and turning it into something that creates a benefit for future generations? So these are the issues that are at the heart of the resolution that I'm bringing forward today. And I just want to give a quick outline of what I intend to do in the time that I have here today, Mr. Speaker. I want to outline some of the reasons why I think we are where we are today. I want to talk a bit about some of the economic theories related to natural resource development and the type of problems such resource riches can cause. And I want to look at some strategies which other jurisdictions have developed to deal with the problems caused by resource riches, Mr. Speaker. I want to look at these other cases and see what we can learn from other jurisdictions who've gone through similar circumstances, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we are in the middle of a financially challenging time, and it's probably one of the most difficult times in our history. And what's happening in the province maybe can be compared to the financial difficulties which we experienced in the 1930s, Mr. Speaker. We've got a $2 billion deficit. Offshore oil revenue is half of what it was projected to be. We have not been living within our means, Mr. Speaker, and we have to change the way we manage the affairs of the province, Mr. Speaker. It's quite clear. So the questions that we should be asking ourselves is, while we have the immediate situation which government is forced to deal with on a daily basis, we also need to be asking questions, how did we end up in this situation, Mr. Speaker? What could we have done differently to have avoided these problems? What can we do now to see that this does not happen again? And what can we learn from the experiences of other jurisdictions, other places who have faced or are facing similar circumstances, Mr. Speaker? Those are the questions I think we should be asking ourselves today. And these are the type of questions that we need to deal with in sort of looking at the current situation that we're in. Mr. Speaker, I want to take a bit of time now to talk about the use of theories, Mr. Speaker, and the application of these theories to policy and resource development, because I think this holds some clues to answering the questions that I mentioned earlier, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, theories are developed in many areas, many social sciences, many physical sciences, and theories in public policy are developed, good theories anyway, are developed based on the experiences by looking at other cases, other jurisdictions, and by looking at a number of cases, you recognize similarities and you recognize rules and the way things sort of sometimes might happen. And good theory can be a predictive tool in terms of what you might expect would happen in another circumstance, Mr. Speaker. So when it comes to economics, we have and what happens when a number of valuable resources are discovered. There are a number of theories related to this. One of the common, very popular theories related to it is called the paradox of plenty, Mr. Speaker. And the concept of the paradox of plenty was developed by Terry Lynn Carroll back in the 1990s. And what she did was she looked at places around the world where oil had been discovered, and how this discovery of oil had impacted on the economy of the jurisdictions, and what she found was surprising. It was something unexpected, Mr. Speaker. The paradox of plenty is that in many cases, places that stumble upon great resource wealth often end up worse off in the long run than places that did not discover these resources, Mr. Speaker. So this is strange, and we have to ask, how can this be? You have a sudden influx of revenue, the way we did in this province, but in the end, you're worse off than if you'd never had this revenue, Mr. Speaker. So how could this happen? Why the paradox? Basically, what she found was that the influx of this huge amount of money altered the economies of the jurisdictions and also altered the government institutions and the political institutions in ways that were detrimental to the long-term development of the producing it's sort of like a lottery winner, Mr. Speaker. And by fate and chance in this province, we've won the natural resource lottery, Mr. Speaker. We've got oil and gas off our coast. We've got huge mineral potential and onshore. And Mr. Speaker, but we've all heard the sad stories about people who win, sometimes about the people who win lotteries who end up wasting all their money and then becoming destitute and broke, really. So why does that happen? So we need to we need to ask ourselves how best can we manage resource revenue and what we can learn from the good and bad experience of others. Another theory in economics related to huge wealth from natural resource development is referred to as the Dutch disease, and it's a much narrower concept. Basically, the idea there is that sometimes oil development, huge influx of revenue, has a negative impact on the economy because it diverts attention away from other industries in the province, Mr. Speaker. So that's some of the problems there. Mr. Speaker, we had warning signs in this province that we were maybe having problems with over-dependency on oil and gas revenue. And I'm going to refer to, I guess, an authoritative document. It's the Auditor General's report from 2012. And here's what the Auditor General said in his report at that time. As the significance of offshore oil revenue has impacted the overall economy of Newfoundland and Labrador, there's a corresponding growing reliance by government on oil royalties to fund its programs and services. This revenue source, as a percentage of revenue, has increased substantially in recent years. In 2002-2003, oil royalties were $82 million, or 2.1% of the total revenue, excluding revenue from the Atlantic Accord. In 2011-2012, oil royalties were $2.8 billion, or 34.4% of total revenues, excluding revenues from the Atlantic Accord, an increase of $2.7 billion. So we were seeing a huge increase and a huge dependency on the natural resource revenue, to a point where over 1/3 of our revenue came from oil resources. And this, if you look at the amount of income tax and other revenue generated, the dependence on oil and gas would have been even higher, Mr. Speaker. So the AG certainly recommended that government take warning of this and be aware of this over-dependency on oil. Mr. Speaker, Norway is sort of used as a model of a country that have used its oil revenues in a very prudent manner, Mr. Speaker. And one of the things they've done in their province is they've developed a petroleum fund, Mr. Speaker, where 100% of the oil revenue from from the resources off their coast go into this fund, Mr. Speaker. 100% of the oil revenue goes into the fund, and only the income from this fund can be transferred back to government. So it's seen as a very sort of a responsible way, and I'll give a little more information about this fund when I conclude. There are other funds such as the Alberta Heritage Fund, the Alaska Fund, and other similar funds around the world. And I think it's something that we need to be considering here in this province, and that's the point of this resolution, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much.